Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in Modern. Today we're looking at Rakdos Midrange. Rakdos Midrange is a low-curve aggro midrange deck similar to Death Shadow. In fact, it's extremely similar to Death Shadow and shares many of the same cards. The key difference between the two decks is that Rakdos Midrange doesn't play the card Death Shadow nor its specific enablers like Street Wraith and doesn't play blue. Rakdos Midrange's general game plan is to strip the opponent's hand with discard spells and follow up with cheap, efficient threats and removal. Alternatively, it's to use an early Ragavan to get ahead on mana. Rakdos Midrange places much more emphasis than Death Shadow on running value creatures over tempo creatures. Common choices are Dauthi Voidwalker, Torok, Seasoned Pyromancer, and Kroxa. Voidwalker is particularly good with the various discard effects and removal in the deck. Free casting your opponents to Fairy or Primeval Titan can be a game-winning play. A ton of the cards in the deck synergize with discarding. Dauthi Voidwalker and Torok are the main recipients, with the enablers being Thoughtseize, Inquisition, Kolaghan's Command, Kroxa, Liliana, and Torok as well. Because of its cleaner 2-color mana base, Rakdos Midrange can run a number of useful lands that Death Shadow lacks. Shinka and Shizo are good for pushing Ragavan through blockers and can also be used on Torok and Kroxa. Den of the Bugbear provides another threat in the form of a land and can single-handedly win long games that devolve into top decking. Despite its threats being relatively cheap, the deck is remarkably good at playing the long game. Between the card advantage from Kolaghan's Command, replaying Kroxas, 3-for-1ing the opponent with kicked Toroks, random hits off Ragavan, Den of the Bugbear, and potentially free casting expensive spells with Dauthi Voidwalker, the deck is able to keep up with the resources of higher cost midrange and control decks. It's especially good against linear decks where it can pick apart their hand and aggressively pressure their life total. There's also a variant of this deck called Rakdos Scam, which uses the Evoke Elemental's Grief and Fury to strip the opponent's hand and otherwise get free creatures onto the board using rebuy effects like Malakir Rebirth. Sideboarding and how to beat it. Rakdos Midrange can struggle against decks that out-tempo it or which have redundant card advantage to recoup the losses incurred by Thoughtseize and its other discard effects. Because it lacks the blue interaction of Death Shadow and is slightly slower, it's more susceptible to threats that get around its removal or discard spells. As such, the sideboard is loaded with linear hating effects like Blood Moon and Leyline of the Void. Rakdos Midrange is particularly good against Dirtily decks since it has so many discard effects and graveyard-based decks due to mainboard Voidwalkers. Tips and tricks. Creatures discarded to Liliana or Seasoned Pyromancer can be recurred with Kolaghan's Command and Unearth, and Kroxa can be escaped. Torok gets +1 counters from any discard, not just its own kicker ability. This includes your opponent's cycle and channel lands. You can animate the same Den of the Bugbear multiple times to make additional tokens when it attacks. Dauthi Voidwalker has many important aspects to note about it. Remember that any card going to the opponent's graveyard from anywhere for any reason gets exiled, including fetch lands, surveilled cards, etc. Its ability doesn't ignore timing restrictions for sorcery speed spells. Spells exiled by it can be cast by future Voidwalkers. If you cast a spell with Voidwalker and control another Voidwalker, it will go back to exile and can be cast again. You can play lands with Voidwalker. Like Rest in Peace, some removal that targets Voidwalker like Lightning Bolt will get exiled while others like Fatal Push won't. If an effect like Rest in Peace or Leyline of the Void is in play and Voidwalker is as well, the opponent gets to choose where their cards go, so they can choose not to have Voidwalker be able to cast them. I hope you've enjoyed this look at Rakdos Midrange. I want to thank my fellow players in the Magic community for whom sharing their experiences helps make these guides possible. You can find additional resources, such as an up-to-date deck list, in the description. If you think I left out anything important or got something wrong, please leave your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned to see what deck we look at next time.